Hopefully you've had a chance to play around with this interactive graph on Gapminder. If you haven't, the link is in the description and you should go there now. What I want to do is dig into some questions that I have about some of the more recent bits of data. We can see here quite a strong positive correlation between income and life expectancy. But how do we define how strong that correlation is? And maybe some other things would be correlated even stronger. I have here some data, some other bits of data on those countries. We have the income and life expectancy that were shown in that graph, but I've also got CO2 emissions per person, population of the country, literacy rate, and poverty, a number of people in the country living below a certain poverty line. We saw on the graph how these two were correlated, how income and life expectancy were correlated. But maybe life expectancy correlates better, more strongly with one of the others. Or does literacy rate have some sort of correlation with poverty? If the literacy rate in a country was greater, what would you imagine that had an effect on the number of people in poverty in that country? We're going to try and answer a couple of those questions with these bits of data from 2014. That's the most recent I could get them. Firstly, I'm going to show you how to recreate, in a certain sense, the graph over here. If I click on the letters above these columns here, well, if I click on them separately, then it'll just fit between. But if I hold Control and then click another, then it'll select them both. And I can go Insert, Chart, and it should give me a scatter graph. Now, this still looks quite a lot different to the one over here. You may have noticed, if you've got a keen eye for graphs, something special about the income scale along the bottom. It doesn't step up in a linear scale. It doesn't step up by the same amount each time. If you see 500, 1,000, 2,000. Now, that's not because they've made a mistake, like you might have made a mistake when drawing graphs in year 7 and made some stupid mistake with the axes. You can see instead of adding the same amount on each time, it's timesing by the same amount each time. It's timesing by 2, and then by 2, and then by 2, and then by 2, blah, 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 blah. We call that a logarithmic scale. And back in Google Sheets here, we can change it to a logarithmic scale by going over here to Customize, and we want horizontal axis, and scroll down and click logarithmic scale. There we go, and we can see that it's, in this case, times by it's timesing by a certain thing, but the vertical bars are slightly different, and we can see that strong correlation again, that correlation there. I'd quite like to attach a number to that, and we have a way of attaching a number to that to quantify correlation, which you'll learn about more so in A-level maths, but we can just calculate it very easily here. I'm going to close that to the side. We can calculate it very easily in Google Sheets. Come on, drag to the side graph. There we go. I'm going to click on any empty cell in the spreadsheet and press equals. If you know anything about spreadsheets, the equals tells us that we're going to enter a formula. And we're going to type in Pearson. Pearson was the name of the mathematician the surname of the mathematician who came up with this correlation coefficient here, the thing that's going to measure correlation for us. So I've typed in Pearson and then open bracket. I'm going to click where I clicked before. I'm going to click the top of the column B, then a comma, and then the top of column C. So I've told it I want the correlation between those two things, and then I'm going to close my bracket and press enter. And it's told us that the correlation is 0.63 blah, 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 blah. The correlation coefficient goes between -1 and 1, where 1 is perfect positive correlation, so exactly aligned in a straight line, and -1 is perfect negative correlation, so exactly aligned in a straight line but going downwards instead. So what we've got here is actually quite a high, as expected, positive correlation. Now let's see how that compares with a couple of different ones. So suppose I want literacy rate and poverty, as I said before. Let's do the whole thing again. I'm going to make that graph a bit smaller. And I'm going to go through what I did again to make a graph and the correlation coefficient for these two. So the graph first. I want to select those two columns. Insert chart. Ugh, that's not very nice. That's because this scale up here and this outlier all the way up here. Maybe a logarithmic scale would make that easier to see as well. Vertical axis and logarithmic scale. Okay, that's quite a messy graph. That doesn't look like it's going to be a strong correlation, but let's quantify that. Let's put a number to it and do what we did before. It sort of does look like it's going down this way. So this cell down here equals Pearson, open brackets, and what did I want? Literacy rate and poverty. So column, comma, other column, close bracket, enter, -0.278, blah, 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 blah. So what that's saying is we do have negative correlation between these two. So bear in mind this is actually real life data from the world. We're saying from the actual real life data there is negative correlation between these two. That if the literacy rate, if a country has a higher literacy rate, then in general it's got lower numbers of people living in poverty. But we can see that the correlation isn't quite as strong as income and life expectancy. What you should do with this spreadsheet now is investigate some questions for yourself like that. Can you find others of these variables, others of these columns that correlate even better? And can you think of reasons why that might be? Give that a go yourself and try to understand these bits of data in a bit more detail.